There we go. Hello, everybody. Hope you did your 2-minute silence, as we did here today. It's Ergonomics with me and Stephen Howe. All feels a bit sort of down after 2-minute silence, doesn't it? I'm normally into the show full of energy, but it just doesn't seem quite so right. We have a special guest with us today, Tracy Kimberg. Hello, nice of you to join us.
Hi, Tracy.
We've just got our cups of tea. What have you got there?
I've got a turmeric puka.
Yeah.
It's a joke in our house. We call it
pucker. It is.
We call it puka tea here as a joke, but it's not
puka tea
because everybody else thinks it's disgusting, but I love it. So this is puka turmeric, and it's
well, there you go. Look, other teas are available, but I've got a pucker tea as well, which is a matcha green. If pucker, you're watching, you're not puka. I love you very much, and you can send us free tea bags if you like. That'd be great. There we go. So I can take away that banner at the bottom now.
You can,
which I will do. And yes, so Tracy, do introduce yourself.
So yes, my name, obviously, as you can read, for those that can't read, I'm Tracy Kimberg. I'm a relationship expert, and I would like to say my purpose is to help people design the relationship that works for them, so that it can work, because that's the only way, really.
Well, there you go. Now, we had a little chat prior to the show about what we're going to come on and talk about today, and you said, why don't we talk about the ergonomics of relationships? Because ergonomics is about actually trying to fit the environment that you're in, the situation that you're in, to the person, to make it work. So how would you see the ergonomics of a relationship?
I think there are quite a few factors that are important, just like anybody, if they want to start designing something to work for them. I think the most important thing is the person that is. How are you going to really be sure of what you need as a person to find happiness, so that, or not happiness, a relationship that works for you. And then the understanding of the person that you are in a relationship with, whether it's your partner or somebody at work or your child or a friend, that relationship dynamic. Do you understand that person, and are you willing to see them from that perspective as well? What do they need to have a relationship that works for them? And then it's about being willing to be vulnerable and to be honest within yourself, and allow that also to come back to you from the other person, without having this feeling of, oh, I've got to defend myself, I've got to justify my point of view, without really trying to understand how it works for the other person.
There you go. Stephen, you're
what do
nodding.
you say, Steve? You're just nodding. Doing
I'm just listening. I'm taking it all on board. It's really interesting. I mean, from your perspective, Tracy, what's the biggest challenge that you sort of come across? What's the most common challenge that you come across? Is it people being able to be honest? Do people find it difficult to be honest in certain relationship situations, do you think?
I think a lot of the time people aren't honest, first of all, with themselves. And that means about being honest about who you're presenting in the relationship. Sometimes you know that you're being an idiot, but you aren't honest with yourself in admitting it. And that is not being dishonest with yourself. And also, of course, then the honesty about being willing to be so vulnerable in a relationship. All the different types of relationships there are, not only as a couple, but in any relationship, really. The vulnerability that you need to bring into the relationship, which goes very hand in hand with honesty and trust, doesn't it? So I find that's the biggest problem, is the unwillingness, or the an inability to break down those walls that people build up, that they can't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, relationships are really important in the workplace, incredibly important in the workplace.
Yeah.
How people get on with each other is part of the ergonomic. You know, if you think about it in terms of if you're in an office space and you're in a bank of people at that space, I mean, just for the, you know, aspect of things like noise, for example. How many times have people out there worked in a little group in an office and it's like, I can't focus here because, you know, these kind of people are noisy, etc. But part of that is a physical thing. You know, these people make a noise, but part of it is relationship as well. Part of it is one group of people in that space maybe not understanding the needs of others, maybe not communicating the needs of others, maybe the person that's actually struggling with the noise, for example, not communicating that it is an issue. And then these things can build up, you know, and if the communication isn't there, etc., you know, before you know it, that person's just off ill, or that person's just, you know, suffering with anxiety, and, you know, it's manifesting itself in other ways. And, you know, and suddenly we get a workplace assessor in because, you know, they're starting to see musculoskeletal issues or whatever, and part of it's to do with tension in the back or whatever else. And actually, it could have been resolved with communication right out front.
Exactly. And I also think that a very important factor about relationships at work is in some workplaces, some are different. I mean, not everybody has an office, like the office type of scenario where everybody knows everything about everybody. But some offices are quite corporate and people don't really share about their personal stuff. So everybody sitting in the office has their own baggage, their own stuff that they're going through, their own issues with their partner or their children, you know, financial problems, emotional stuff. So, you know, I think the important thing about relationships in the office is to understand really that each individual in the office has their own story, and to be mindful of that helps you have more patience with people. Because if you are the guy let's use your example, Graham, that is the loud guy at the table making a lot of noise, and I'm not choosing you because you kind of outgoing.
Oh, it's true. Don't worry, it's true.
And I'm maybe the person that's sitting at my table trying to focus, and I'm really battling to get this deadline done. But I'm also having problems at home with my partner, or, you know, something's going on, someone's ill at home, and my fuse is so much shorter. So I think if I was a corporate manager, I would definitely have vulnerability meetings where people were able to, in a safe space, share about what's going on for them, and so that there's a bit more understanding. A vulnerability meeting in a safe space, I think, is a very important way to help people have deep understanding for one another in an office surrounding, and also it helps people feel almost connected. Because if you're vulnerable with somebody, I mean, look at any relationship. When you meet your partner, for instance, when you met your partner, Graham, I know you guys have been married for a long time. I don't know about you, Steve, but it's about sharing in the beginning, isn't it? Oh, this is my story, this is your story. And that is a vulnerable thing to do, the sharing. And, you know, if you allow that in the office space safely, where people aren't going to get bullied or labeled and something like that, it is helpful, because nobody wants a label either.
Tracy, one of the topics that Graham and I cover on this show, probably pretty much every week, but certainly most weeks, is talking about people now working remotely, working at home. What sort of impact and are you sort of seeing on the stresses and strains of relationships, for people working at home, and maybe their partners are also working at home, but also those business relationships where somebody up till 2.5 years ago sat next to somebody on a daily basis. It was their line manager. Now they're sort of potentially not seeing them, and maybe only seeing them every 3 months. What sort of trends and impacts are you seeing on those two things?
Well, there are quite a few actually. As for relationships, the one aspect that often comes forward when couples come to see me is this: I'm so sick of being around this person for 24 hours a day. I just need time out. And it's that there's no defined break between this is our time versus work time, because a lot of people are actually working in the kitchen or at a dining room table, or have made a make-do office in a cupboard or something. So not everybody is privileged to have an actual office. So that's difficult. And that's the one side of things. So that conflict starts arising as the tension starts building. And then the other side is that people almost disconnect from the office, and they detach from that emotional vulnerability at the office. So they become more irritated with the people at the office. There's less of a connection with the office people. So, that's the one thing. People feel like, oh, I actually prefer this, and I don't really want that back in my life because it's too much drama, for instance. And then there's the other side of the people that are the social butterflies that are really suffering, that need that connection, and they can't wait to get back to the office, and for they feel almost very isolated and are almost depressed because this is not what they want. And a lot of them actually end up resigning and looking for other jobs where they can actually interact. But there's so many ways around that. I mean, for me, that's a self-employed person and that does a lot online. You don't really see this as a barrier anymore. Although I'm quite an affectionate and tactile person, I like hugging people and so on. I do miss, actually meeting up with people in person more than in the past. It was always in person. But I think that's where you have to connect with yourself as a person and ask yourself, what do you need for the relationship with yourself to be healthy? What do you need in your life to make it work? So if you don't feel something's right, then you need to add something in, because that saying, if nothing changes, nothing changes, is so true, even with relationships. So with your own relationship, if things have changed post-COVID and you feel just not great, ask yourself what you need and how you can change that.
It is one of the problems out there that there are two currencies. So there's a currency of love and there's a currency of money. And and I say that because whether you work for somebody, as Stephen does, or whether you work like we do, Tracy, for ourselves, you are ultimately, when you are in business, you're held accountable. And you're held accountable to either your boss and the organization that you work for, or you're held accountable by your clients. Because let's not beat around the bush when it comes to this. But people say, oh, when you become self-employed, you escape that kind of control, right? But actually you don't, because your money only comes to you if you're doing great work for your clients, and therefore the accountability is still there. It's just directly to the clients. Otherwise the tap stops, right? There's actually no one in between. And actually for a lot of people, being employed is probably the better option, because the paycheck will get made every month, until they stop performing.
Exactly.
Right.
I think I thought we lost Steve for a second.
No, do you know what it was? This is a different place. I'm actually working in a different part of the house now. I'm at the front of the house, and there's a FedEx van just turned up, and the guy's like waving at me like this to get my attention. So I went off. I've given him the thumbs up, and he's left the parcel on the front door. So
Good.
you haven't lost me. Don't worry.
Good. Well, it's funny that you bring up the money thing. I was talking to somebody this week about the relationship we have with money, and you have to really design that relationship very carefully. Ergonomically, call it that. Let's use the word. You know, or what is your relationship with money? Yes, people have this misconception that when you're self-employed, you're free, but it's actually quite stressful. And there's a lot of stress that goes with being self-employed, and you are the responsible one. You can't just say, oh, well, that's not my job. Everything's your job. And you're also not only accountable to yourself, but you so accountable to your family, who you have to support. And like you say, your clients, you're so accountable to them to show up and make it work properly. And yes, it is about money, because we can't survive without it. But I think, what is your relationship with money? Do you see it as something that without it you're useless and a failure, or do you see it as a privilege, that it's flowing your way, and that you can be grateful for it, and really respect the money that comes your way? Because I think sometimes when I used to be employed, I used to be employed in corporate for quite a couple of years, and it's very, you almost become used to and take it for granted, that money that you get every month. You get your check and you just can relax and sit back. You don't actually appreciate that, oh, there's people out there that have a lot of stress attached to money, to earning the money.
But I also think in society at the moment there's a lot of dual conversations going out there. There's a lot of paradoxes in the way that people talk about, if you like, work-life balance. I don't particularly like that term, because work is part of life, etc. as well. But that kind of equilibrium, or trying to get that equilibrium right, because on the one hand there's a lot of businesses or a lot of people that will talk about, in their ethos, they will say it's really important that you put your own health first, and that you get your own relationships first, etc. And you really look after you and the people around you, etc. But then if you were to do work for those people, they would want every ounce of blood, and so it's, how many people are really living it, if you know what I mean, or how many people is it lip service to an ideology, but actually ultimately how many companies are really getting this stuff? Because ultimately, if you wanted to really keep your employees happy, one of the things that you should be aware of is their relationships with, not just within the business, but outside of the business too. And unless you're really interested, I mean, properly interested in that, and really have an understanding of that, you may not keep that employee. Because ultimately, if you force somebody to, within their work, to make a choice and go, well, yeah, but come on, sorry, Stephen, we are flying out to wherever this Saturday, and I don't care whether it's your son's Christmas play or whatever, we've got to go. That's not understanding, is it? That's not putting Stephen's life first in all of this. So, and it's difficult, but it's difficult. This stuff is actually really difficult.
And is it more difficult now with people, like we touched on before, being more dispersed? Because is it easy for people to build up those relationships, especially with new starters who they've got no background with, who are then now working remotely, or they have very little physical interaction with? So does a difficult situation actually get sort of, is it made worse, as it were, is extenuated by the fact that you aren't physically, a lot of people will maybe open up over a coffee or lunch or something like that, and people maybe don't feel as comfortable doing over a screen. So does it then bring other challenges into play, Tracy?
Definitely. I think I've had a couple of people that have come to me because they're suffering with this with a feeling of depression, starting up. A lot of people lost their jobs during COVID and have started new jobs. And a lot of companies are still only online. And the people feel very like left out and not part of the group in this new setting, because they've never actually been to the office, and the training is not on par. They left to figure it out themselves. There's not somebody that you can just look at next to it and say, look, the desk next to you, oh shit, I can't do this thing, can you help me? You know, you have to kind of feel like an idiot and call in and say, oh, I can't understand this thing. So it brings a lot of difficulties for people at the office, definitely. And you know, if I think the leaders of the company, call it the department leaders or the managers, call them whatever you want, I think it's so important to not have a you and me culture, but to have a us culture, even if the people are working remotely, so that they can still feel, okay, it's us in this together, and you know, put things into place so that people are able to reach out and feel part of the group, maybe even more than it used to be, so that they don't feel isolated, and then you end up with this huge staff turnover because people are unhappy. And what do they do when they're unhappy? They leave. Or they're always sick, aren't they? Because they don't want to be at work, and they either take sick to avoid work, or they really do start, like Graham said, getting sick because they're mentally not healthy, and it spills over into physical unwellness.
That's a really, really interesting conversation. I mean, just take a look at first dates on TV. I don't know whether you've ever watched first dates on TV, but it's a really great example of kind of what's happening in culture, because these people are going for a date set up by a TV production, right, with someone that they've never known, but they're trying to match them on some of the things that they have in common, and maybe it's a little bit better than Married at First Sight, because you know that's really extreme. But ultimately, one of the conversations that always comes up in those programs when the couple meet at the bar is, you know, what's your dating life been like? You know, how's dating been? And it's been, yeah, well, I've done all of the online dating, I've done all of the, you know, Tinder and whatever, I've done all the swiping, and it's just never worked out for me, because there's something that gets missed out on by, you know, people hiding behind a smokescreen, if you like, online. And yet now what we're doing is we're doing the same in our work lives as well. You know, we're people are not face to face, they're not interacting in the same way a lot of the time. So, you know, you could be whoever you wanted to be on Zoom if you wanted to
You're
do
so
that.
right.
You know, and maybe actually it's been going on for years, because maybe this first started with email, right? Maybe that was the first part of it. And think about email. That's to some extent, I feel that there's a kind of backlash against that, and I think that's to some extent why the younger generation prefer sort of text messaging as opposed to in business, as opposed to email, because at least it's more immediate, and you know if someone's not answering you straight away. You know, emails, you used to have a boss over someone's shoulder going, and then next, I think what you should do is put that. This whole thing's really orchestrated as a response. You know, it's like a game of chess. It's like, now what do we put to get the right response from them? Oh yeah, look what they've come back with. Now what are we going to go back with? You know.
But email was the first way of stopping human interaction, because how many people within office blocks or businesses or floors, rather than getting up and going walking 20 yards down and sitting at the end of someone's desk, would go, I can't do a quick email ping. And that almost was the beginning of reducing social interaction in the workplace, because it and it also, go on. And
taking away accountability.
Yeah. Right. Oh, well, he's got it. I sent him an email, so it's not my job. I've passed it over to him.
And also the very regular thing is, that's not what I meant. You read it wrong.
Yeah.
And you have this all the time in relationships. People say things and they say, oh no, I was only joking, or in an email, no, you read it wrong, that was not my tone that I meant. You chose to read it like that, and this is where it all boils down for me always about being honest and vulnerable and saying a thing like it is. Sometimes I get that you can maybe be too honest, but is there such a thing as too honest? It's about being emotionally intelligent enough to say something honestly, so that you are willing to completely accept the responsibility of how your words are going to be received. And if you're not sure about how you're going to say that thing, it's about thinking about, can I say it differently? If you say, well, I'm going to say it like this, and if she takes it the wrong way, it's her problem. No, that's not how it works.
And yet, after saying all of that about working from home, the flip side of all of that is that more people working from home, potentially, if the flexibility is there, could be better for relationships, could it not? The home relationships, because it does mean that more people are potentially seeing more of their children. They're seeing more of their partner. They're actually interacting more. So are we at a sort of crossroads here where, it done the right way, all of this change in work could be really beneficial to us relationship wise for society, but actually if we don't do the right things, it could actually be detrimental?
I agree. I think you have to really make sure that you make it work the way it works for your family, and not compare yourself to other people who are doing it differently. I mean, each family has their own dynamic, their own type of children, their own type of partner, their own type of interaction, and like they say, blue jobs and pink jobs and things like that. But unfortunately, nobody's done this before, and we all just figuring it out as we go along. So I say to people, right, if you're in this thing and you now all of a sudden finding yourself working from home, and there's challenges, there's things that you guys are butting heads about at home, you and your partner or you and your kids, then a very important thing that to try in your family would be have a weekly, just like a sit down. I like calling the vulnerability sit downs, where everybody sits down and says, look, this is not working for me. I need you guys to be quiet when I'm on a phone call, or I need a little bit of time out. I need to get out of the house. And then your wife might say, well, please don't do it when it's crazy hour from 5 to 7. Can you make it another time? Because I mean, she'd also probably love to go on a walk from 5 to 7. But it's about being emotionally create an emotional safety for everybody in the house, because kids also have a word that's valid. And if you can listen to your kid and say, or your child, and say, look, how's this for you with daddy at home? What can I do better? What can I do? What am I doing that's really irritating you? And allow them to also have an opinion, because this is how you build that relationship where they trust you, is you talk about things that seem irrelevant in a way that makes them feel important and that their opinion matters, so that when the real stuff starts happening, when they turn into teenagers, that they know that, oh, I know that my parents actually listen to what I have to say, even if it's about, can we please not have mushy peas? I don't like mushy peas. It's a simple thing, the tiny little things that start building those blocks for when the big stuff starts happening, when they get exposed to drugs or sex and toxic friendships and things like that as teenagers. You don't want them going on Google finding answers. You want them coming to you as the parent
Yeah.
and saying, "Oh, Dad, can we go for a drive? I need to talk to you." You know, my girlfriend wants to have sex and I'm not ready. You know, you want them to come to you with that type of thing. And you know,
it's really interesting because I plug for a client that just recorded a podcast which is going out soon for the Red Thread Partnership. Hi, if you're watching, Freddie and Mary Claire from the Red Thread Partnership. And in that podcast, which is a podcast with a guy called Mike from the Red Arrows. Well, he's actually an ex-Red Arrow. He's now flying with the Blades, but he gives an expose of what it was like flying with the Red Arrows. And that was a conversation around business culture and trust and great leadership, etc. And exactly the same information was being shared, right? About debriefing, about checkings on a regular basis. And I don't want to spoil it, so people need to actually listen to the whole podcast, and it is absolutely brilliant. But ultimately, the same problem can happen within businesses. That if you're checking in with someone once a year with an annual appraisal, that's not enough
for 5 minutes, especially. It's not. How can you build a relationship in 5 minutes?
Typically, the way it goes is that and still businesses do this. Once a year, you'll get called into an office. Someone will sit you down and go, right, how do you think you did in this last year? Well, why ask them that now, right? If you had an issue with them somewhere along the line in that year, why don't you say, you seem to be struggling with this, or what's going on? Can I help you with that? Rather than getting it, well, obviously we've seen a decline after a whole year because we've just left it to. That's just bad management.
Terrible. Yes.
Terrible management.
Yes. The thing that happens is, don't forget we're human beings and we all have intuition. And you start picking up on those things, whether you are strongly sure about it, or you start picking up that someone's not nice with you or has a vibe with you, or call it whatever you want. Your managers have got a stiff lip when they're speaking to you, or the emails sound a bit sharp or something like that. You picking up on that. And what do? We don't communicate it. We shut down and we start thinking, oh my God, and you start stressing and you start assuming, I'm not doing my job right. I need to work harder. This is not right. You start becoming worried and anxious about your performance at work. The same in relationships, when you pick it up with your partners but off, and then you think, oh my God, they don't love me anymore, or they annoyed at me because I didn't do this or that, and you start assuming this whole big story. Whereas if you had a regular check-in where you could sit down and say, right, we're going to speak honestly with each other, and this is confidential, and this is not going to hurt our relationship. We actually want honesty here. So what isn't working for you? Oh, I'm picking up your emails sound a bit weird, or I'm picking up that you're a bit off with me. Have I done something to offend you? And you can, the problem is we weren't taught this as children. So now it's very alien to us as adults to do this, even in the workplace or even in our own personal relationships. So, we can start now with our kids and teach our kids communication is a safe thing. Communicate. And I'm not going to get angry if you say, please don't do this, or please knock when you come into my room. It's not, or if your partner says, can you please stop leaving your pants on the floor in the bathroom every night? Simple things like that. It's simple things, but it's about communicating, because those little things like the pants on the floor, or not unpacking the dishwasher, or dare I say,
they build up.
They build up, and it becomes a huge big explosion. The same at the workplace, and those are the people that are actually pretty good employees that end up leaving because they don't feel valued.
So, Stephen, you're looking around all over the place. What's going on? I've got to ask.
So we've got the parcel on the front doorstep.
Right.
The window cleaner's just turned up.
Wow.
And is now cleaning the windows, and has then just picked the parcel up and said, parcel? I mean, it's just timing, isn't it? What's the, we do a live broadcast, 45 minutes, and the window cleaner turns up and a FedEx parcel. So there was a guy sort of waving a parcel behind me. So I do apologize. I was taking it all in. I was listening. I was just conscious there was a brush coming towards me.
Because in that non-verbal communication, I was just watching Stephen's eyes, and they were just like,
yeah.
It's like
it was the brush going back and forward on the windows, like, and then there's
must find out what's going on there.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Sorry,
whilst we have Tracy here, there's two questions that we definitely cover. And Tracy, you've been really helpful already this morning. I think
brilliant.
You've opened us our eyes to a different conversation around ergonomics, which is great. But two things that we've got to talk to you about. And we'll go in this particular order. One is the reaction last night. I don't know whether you saw it, or not last night, but the night before. The reaction to Matt Hancock going into "I'm a celebrity, get me out of here," which was phenomenal. So just pick up a little bit on the reaction of when somebody walks in the room that because this is the thing that people were trying to address in that camp. When somebody walks into the space who you have a problem with because of what they've done in the past, and what they've done, and you're very aware of it, and it has, for a lot of people, it has a deep emotional impact, and yet in some ways that you've got to fight that because you've got to try and get on with that person for the benefit of the situation you're in. So we'll cover that one, and then after that, very quickly, because Stephen here has to go out and earn a living and sell ergonomic equipment. One of the things that we have struggled with over and over again, and everybody within the industry struggles with, is trying to get this message across about why you should use with a laptop a piece of kit which didn't come with the laptop in the first place, right? Because laptops just don't do what they're meant to do for us, right? How do we, or as a relationship expert, how do you address that? How do we start to change people's attitudes towards looking after themselves? So let's go with the first one first. The
elephant in the room situation.
The elephant in the room situation.
So I'll go back to my favorite word, honesty. First of all, the elephant knows he's picking up on everybody's non-verbal communication, which is obviously their body language, the rolling of the eyes, and the huffing and puffing, and people holding their breath, and everything that's going on. So I always say that it's okay not to like people. It's because not everybody likes you, right? And that's fine. I don't want to be liked by everybody, because it gives me an excuse to feel okay about the people that I don't like, But in a situation where you're forced at work to be in an office where someone that you cannot stand or a family member that gets on your nerves, that you have to interact with this person, then I think it's about accepting the fact that you don't like the person as okay, because why don't you like the person? The person has maybe done something that goes against your values and your boundaries and whatever, and you're allowed to have those things. So how do you interact with this person then? I think this is when you have to just be a decent human being and just treat the person with respect. You don't have to be friends. And always conduct yourself as an emotionally intelligent person that is not that is being authentic. You don't have to pretend, but you also don't have to be rude.
And
So,
interestingly, that is exactly the advice. I don't know can't remember what the lady's name is, but the lady that was in Coronation Street.
Sue Cleaver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was exactly the advice that she gave to Boy George, who was kind of like, and he turned around to her and said, "When did you get so wise?" Absolutely spot on. But it was interesting. The other person that I really liked in there, in terms of what they did, was the journalist lady who went straight up to Matt Hancock, sat down with him, and said, "What are you doing?" Immediately it was like, just not in a nasty way at all, in what I call a journalistic way, questioning, sort of explain to me, tell me your side of the story, explain to me, but at the same time she put it back to him. She said, "Well, clearly you know that this isn't going to be popular. Clearly you know that there's going to be people at home that are not going to,
yeah.
And actually, sometimes I think that's a very good way, as you say, being honest. You can actually have those conversations as long as you're not nasty with those conversations. You're just,
sometimes it helps to just pause and ask yourself, what is actually going on in here for you, and often it's about you are being triggered about something that someone similar to this has happened somewhere else in your life. And it triggers you, and then obviously all these emotions immediately come forward and say, "Don't do this because this is what happened. Stay away from this person because this is what they did, and this is going to happen again." So your intuition tells you run in the opposite direction, but you can't when you work with somebody like that, or it's a family member. And there's so many difficult dynamics in relationships when you're forced to. I mean, I won't mention a name, but I used to belong to a networking group where one of the top guys in the networking group, I just could not be around this person for various reasons, but I like the rest of the group. So you just avoid that person, and you be decent, but you avoid that person. It's about having the conversation, like you say, Graham. Say to the person, for instance, "Look, we're going to have to work together, but it's very obvious to me that there's a clash here. We don't get on. I'd prefer to keep it very professional, and I don't want to have any bad vibes between us, but can we just make it as civil as possible?" And just address the elephant.
Great advice.
And also, Graham, with what you were saying there, is there a slant on the fact that how the program gets edited to potentially just build a bit more? The impression you got was, I mean, I don't usually watch it, but watched it. The impression is he walked in, she went straight over and started questioning him.
It could have been
that could have been
2 hours later.
Apart. But then what does it do? It creates these sort of conversations and interest and headlines. So it's like anything you watch, unless it's 100% pure live, there's an element of clever editing to almost create that situation.
Well, the only thing that I'm really caring about within that whole situation is, I want to start a campaign, Matt Hancock and Sean Walsh, for pantomime this year, because I mean, personally, I think they'd make a great pantomime team. Matt Hancock would obviously have to play the baddie, but it would just as a comedy duo, they were really, really quite funny. So what about that final question to kind of finish off on today? Then how do we overcome this relationship problem with something that people understand? So it's a relationship problem with something that people understand, people get it, but trying to actually get them to do it. So it's about turning something people know into action, I guess.
I think it's about accepting that anything that is new will be faced with apprehension. And why is it? It's because people fear the unknown, and they don't want to maybe do something that they might not be able to do well. So it's about tiny little chunks of helping people realize that actually this works. And if it comes from in business, if it comes from the top, it has to also be a two-way street. where the top people need to also be vulnerable, and be honest about them as a person, so that they can create this emotional safety net in the company, this whole culture of we are vulnerable and honest in this company, and that's why we are on us.
So we need to be targeting business leaders to make them do this.
Oh,
and say
yeah.
you've got to actually show people that this is the right
Show
thing to
them
do.
It's
how it
very much a
works.
top-down
Yeah.
sort of thing. Influence the people at the top, and then it then becomes part of their culture, and then feeds its way down.
Yes, and also it works from both ways. If the top gets pressure from the bottom, they have to do it. So
Yeah.
if you explain, if you also kind of filter it in very gently from the bottom with the people, and say, right, in our little team, in our office, we the accounting team, we're going to have our own little vulnerability meeting, and people, the management will then see, right, this team's great, what they're doing right, tell us, and it'll come through that way. It has to come from all directions, and you do it at home as well, because if you have a bad day at work and you get home and you barking at the dog and barking at everybody when you're at home, it's important for them to know why, and for especially children to understand that, look, my dad's not cross at me. My dad had a really bad day, and all he needs is a hug and some quiet time. And kids start understanding that, and then they will bring this into school and into their relationships as they get older as well. And it takes generations, doesn't it, to change the culture in various things. And we can start today. We can start today, and every little thing that we do makes a difference.
Well, we are striving to make a difference here on Wow Ergonomics. We've been striving for a couple of years.
We're succeeding, Graham. It's just an ever moving feast, isn't it? We just got to keep pushing, and we're converting people. There's just so many millions to convert. We just got to keep going.
Yeah. But it's really interesting that whole piece about showing it from the top, because and one of the things that really kind of gets my goat is when
how long have you got?
Yeah, it is when I see somebody and they get it, and then they demonstrate it, and they go, look, they even do a post on LinkedIn or wherever, and they go, look, I'm doing it right. I'm showing everyone, look, and they write a piece around good ergonomics or whatever, and then the next week they're back to not doing it.
Yeah.
And you just think there's something in there about consistency as well,
Yeah.
and you just want to keep shaking these people and go, you know about consistency in brand. You're not even being consistent in your own brand because of this as well. If you strongly believe these things, you've got to do it every single time. And it's the only way we make good change.
So true. And even though consistency is so vitally important, at the same time, if it's not working, what you're doing, it's okay to change your mind. And sometimes you just need a bit of a change of mind. I mean, if you're trying to bring in a new culture into your business that's been very stiff-lipped and private, and you're trying to create a vulnerable culture and an honest culture, people are going to be very uncomfortable probably in the beginning and think, what the hell's going on here? I'm not going to share that I'm going through a divorce at the office, because then everybody's going to judge me and blah, blah, blah. So, it's about changing how you do it. You start in small groups where people might feel more vulnerable, and then branch it out to bigger things, and maybe a little feature of a certain person in a department every week is the marketing about storytelling when you're self-employed. it's about telling a story about each employer and saying, did you know that so and so has 2 dogs and 3 kids and her daughter's actually blind, and this is what she's dealing with at home.
Mm.
And make people see, oh my gosh, everybody is a human being, and we all need to just accept that.
Yeah. And ultimately, I think habits are really difficult to break.
It's 3 months.
just even little habits are really difficult to break. I mean, if you went into the kitchen in an office and you said, actually, I want you to start making your tea by putting the milk in first rather than the tea bag and the hot water, and because you've always done it tea bag and then hot water then the milk, someone would get it first time probably, right?
Yeah,
it's the same thing. Someone will get it the first time because you've just told them how to do it, but then they revert back straight away. And then you just got to keep telling them, no, you've got to make it this way. You've got to make it this way. You've got to do it this way. And it just, that's why we're going to continue to do this, because we just have to keep nagging.
But that's exactly your poll that you put up yesterday, wasn't it, Graham? About what makes marketing a success, or what was the poll you put up?
Have no idea. That was yesterday.
It does that many, you can't remember.
my brain doesn't remember what I did yesterday. What was the one yesterday? Okay, let's have a look.
It said something about what makes your marketing a success. Is it consistency? Is it I don't know. I know the one that I obviously clicked was consistency, I think. Can you find it?
Yeah,
the king of polls is scrolling through his polls.
I'm going to find it now. Are you confident about the content you produce on LinkedIn? It was yesterday. Are you confident about it?
What were the options?
And yes, I'm a seasoned professional, in practice but progressing, not even started, and other. Please comment.
No, that's the one. Not the one. Must have been another one.
Tracy, could have been someone else's poll, but we won't tell him that.
I think it was.
Well, today's one was about practice makes perfect, or improvement.
That was it.
Oh, right. There you go.
That's it. And this is it. Practice makes perfect. If we just practice this new skill, because it's a skill, isn't it? Vulnerability and honesty is a skill. And if we can practice it at work.
But it never makes perfect. That's the thing. And people were voting on that, because I said, really, you never get to perfect.
That's about growth. Constant growth,
Yeah. But it's an interesting thing that we tell our children. Practice makes perfect. No, it doesn't. And the problem with that whole saying is it's okay to have mistakes, because you will never ever be perfect.
Yeah,
it's just about practice. Practice helps you to grow. That's much better saying. And there we go. And I've just caught my headphones on my thing, and so I look like a pillow. Thanks to Tracy Kimberg.
Thanks
today for coming in. That's been a really interesting conversation. Thanks as ever to Stephen Howe. Thanks to everybody for allowing us to just do 2 minutes of silence at the beginning of this. Appreciate not everybody might have taken that in exactly the right way. They might have felt that we shouldn't have started at 11 o'clock at all. But then, there's two ways of looking at everything. And for us, we felt that maybe we might remind a few people that there was 2 minutes silence. So please don't be offended by that if you did see the 2 minutes of nothing on the screen there at the beginning. And that is what my 7-year-old's Poppy was for as well.
There you go. Graham, also special thank you to my John the window cleaner and the local FedEx delivery guy for their guest appearances in today's show.
Do you know what? It would have only been better if we'd have got them on. They would be like, what's going on?
Yeah.
We will be back next week when we will have special guests who are, do you remember the next week?
I don't want to get it wrong. Is it Andrew?
Andrew Shepherd.
Andrew Shepherd.
Andrew Shepherd will be joining us next week to talk about his flock.
his flock of flocks.
His flock of flocks. Not that he's a minister, but that's the seating company that he works for. If you want to, you can subscribe to this on all of the various channels, but particularly on Spotify. We do like that because it pushes us up in the ratings, and we are strongly becoming the best ergonomic podcast that is called Wow Ergonomics on Spotify. So
The number one in the field of one.
And we have more exciting news for you as well. It's brand new, so brand new, we haven't even bothered to follow anybody as of yet, but we already have a follower. We are now on Instagram as well as of earlier this week. So we have our very own Instagram. You can find us at, guess what? Wow Ergonomics on Instagram. We were followed
guessed.
by Posture People within about an hour. So good on you, Posture People.
Thank
So
you.
do follow us there, and we might do. In fact, I'm going to do one right now for everybody, and this is going to go straight up. There we go. There we are. Look at that. That's going straight up on Instagram. That's this week's show. Do keep us safe out there, and look after people.
And look after your relationships, guys.
Absolutely. And until next time, bye for now.